Hello and welcome back to They Don't Teach Us in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy. And our returning guest today, I'm really delighted to talk with him because I'll actually just see him in a few weeks at an event that you should go and attend, which is the Seven Figure Attorney Summit. He's been putting on this event for many, many years now. There's a completely revamped 1.5-day schedule, some cool new speakers. I'll mention that I'm really excited to see his COO get on stage and talk about her transition from office manager to chief operating officer, because I think it's going to help a lot of law firm owners better distinguish those roles and responsibilities, how to elevate people, onboard team members. And there's marketing, there's AI. At the Seven Figure Attorney Summit, go to sevenfigureattorney.com. I'll be there as the moderator, but we also have the man, the myth, the legend, the guy who created the event himself, Mr. Craig Goldenfarb. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Great to be here again.
Awesome. So, Craig, the question is, what's the one thing they don't teach you in law school?
It's how to buy a professional soccer team.
Truly one of the coolest things. When you first told me that you were buying a soccer team, I was like, that is awesome. And if I'm not mistaken, that is supposed to be your 10th and final business venture?
Yes. So since I admittedly am a workaholic and still am married after 26 years, we came to a detente, an agreement many years ago that I was limited to 10 businesses, including my law firm. So she said when I was at 9 businesses, my wife said, okay, you better pick one that's really high on your bucket list as your 10th. So I looked at my bucket list, and I've always wanted to own a professional soccer team. I'm a very big soccer fan and player my whole life. Mm-hmm. So I said, look, honey, it looks like my final one is going to be a professional soccer team. So I wanted to get into ownership. So that's what I chose.
I mean, obviously, that's not something that everyone gets involved with, to say the least. I think there's a lot of people who hear something like that and would go, oh, that's really cool. I can't even begin to understand how that happened. So I'm curious, Craig, how did you make that happen?
Well, I think it really started 15 years ago, which, as you know, is when I made my transition from attorney to CEO. And when you make that transition, you start to realize that a lot of your work, what you do all day, is you meet people in different areas. You start with law, and then as your influence expands in the community, because you're now CEO of a company, you're not a lawyer anymore, you start to meet people in charities. You start to meet people in other industries. You start to learn skill sets from people in other industries, and that includes, of course, if you want to start to invest in companies or you're entrepreneurial, you meet people in other industries. So the more I met in finance and entertainment and charities and other industries, the more I realized, well, these are opportunities for me to expand as an entrepreneur, which is really my flow state. My fun is marketing and entrepreneurship. And if you're lucky enough, like I've been very blessed and lucky, to be able to do what I like to do for a living, which is to connect with humans and people in all industries. And then I realized I could start to get into sports and entertainment. So I'm in a couple of companies that are in sports and entertainment. And the main one is the soccer venture. So I started looking 15 years ago when I became a CEO to develop my skill sets in leadership and management. And as you do that, you realize, well, law is a very narrow area. And most lawyers become lawyers and stick with lawyers and hang out with lawyers. And I was like, yay, not so great. So I started to hang out with a lot of different industry leaders and community leaders. And that just made my life a lot richer. And then it guided me towards where I wanted to go, which was the sports and entertainment industry.
So you have 15 years of buildup on this. Along the way, undoubtedly, you are consciously and subconsciously preparing as an entrepreneur to go through these different business ventures. What are some of the most powerful common threads that you have seen that drive success across all of these different ventures?
Well, it's meeting the right people and being able to spot the right type of people. So, 95% of small businesses fail, or whatever number that is. So there's a commonality and a thread of the 95% that fail. And there's a commonality and thread of the 5% of entrepreneurs that succeed. I have found in my personal experience that it's a personality type of those who succeed. And it's not the hardworking ones. It's the hardworking ones that also work on themselves. In other words, it's the people who develop themselves as leaders, as maybe practice mindfulness, maybe who are self-aware, who have great EQ, people skills. So it's not just smarts, and it's not just working hard. It's really a combination of a holistic approach to life that I find that I get attracted to those types of people. And when I meet those types of people, I know that they're going to also succeed in wealth and entrepreneurship. And I work my butt off, but that's one of many skill sets that you need to succeed. And when I find someone who I think has the whole package, I surround myself with those types of people, and those types of people usually end up being very successful. So I see character and self-growth and leadership and emotional development as all one package of a type of person. And when I meet that type of person who also owns a business, I want to go into business with them.
That's so along the way, you've created several companies. How many of the companies that you've developed versus bought into, when you're looking for that type of partnership, you're looking for someone who is very engaged, self-development, etc. What are you looking for in that ideal person in terms of what they're bringing to the table opposite your core skill sets?
Well, I've started to, as I've looked at different companies, I'm growing my skill set, which is to be able to take a look at a company. I mean, you look at a term called EBITDA, which is, earnings, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. Most lawyers, 5 years ago, I didn't even know what EBITDA was because I wasn't a full-time entrepreneur yet. So the way you measure a company and the way that you may pay a multiple of EBITDA for a certain type of company and a certain type of industry. So I knew nothing of what I just said more 5 years ago. And then I started hearing these things. So as you develop your skill set, since I didn't get an MBA, and if you've got an MBA, you've got a leg up on people because you know all these things in the first year of getting your MBA. I didn't get one. So I had to learn basic things like, profit and loss statement and looking at EBITDA and what a 3 times EBITDA is and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, but equally important was me having the awareness and the self-awareness that I consider myself when I invest. I'm investing in a person or 2 people or an executive board, that I see commonality in their character and commonality in how they approach things. And also personality type. Like most companies, they need a visionary, and they need the type A person who is actually the person who gets things done. And if you read books like from Napoleon Hill, or you read all the successful books on success, you'll see that most companies, Disney World's a typical example. Roy Disney ran the company, and Walt Disney came up with all the ideas. That's the typical example of a successful company. So I look at that type of thing in many companies to make sure it's not just a visionary or it's not just a boring COO, because you need both in order to have a valuable company. So I invest in people because I can tell by the person or the people that their company is going to do well. So most of my investments have been in companies where I can spot pretty quickly if it's the right executive team, and if it's the right team put together, and that I would like to be a part of that team.
So I know that you have businesses that relate or are tangential to the work that the law firm does. A soccer team is certainly an out of category investment, but I have to imagine there's some corollaries between what you've taken from the in category investments and the out of category investments. What have you pulled from the law, your law firm, and those investments that you're taking with you into other places?
Well, what I pull from it is the linear path that I took was probably the correct one. If you're going to invest in a business as a lawyer, start with a business that's tangential to law because you might know something about it. One of my first businesses was an MRI center. Now, I'm a personal injury attorney. I didn't know anything about MRI machines, except I knew that I could send them some business, which is allowed in Florida if you put a disclosure in your contract. So the very first one my father-in-law helped me out with, because he had several MRI centers, and he taught me how to analyze and hire the right people to run an MRI center, and we bought one. And then after that, after you have the pattern down and the right people, then you can expand that if you choose to. And I'm probably getting a second one. Now, other lawyers I know might have 10 MRI centers. But the reason I chose MRI center was A, I had the assistance of my father-in-law, but B, it's one that I sort of understood, which is what's an MRI machine, how much do you get paid by PIP, by personal injury protection in Florida? How much
Mm-hmm.
does health insurance pay? How you can make it profitable. So when you start another business, please choose one that you have a basic working knowledge of something having to do with it. And the typical
Yeah.
example I've heard on stage at other conferences is lawyers should not choose a restaurant as the first business they go into, because I've never heard one succeed. And I know plenty of lawyers who've started with a restaurant and they never succeed, because a restaurant could not be further away from your skill set as a lawyer than anything. So please don't choose restaurant. And I could be wrong. I guess there's some lawyer in the country that started a restaurant, did just fine.
Sure.
But that's an example to me of you are way outside your lane. Don't do it. But start with one that has something to do with law. A good example is I know plenty that have started a company that, 10 years ago that produced trial exhibits,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was an easy one. A lot of law firms did that, a trial exhibit company. Maybe even a court reporting company, maybe something like that. A translation company for translators, right? So
Mm-hmm.
depositions. These are all things that you can start. Why? Because A, you can feed it business. B, you can get your friends to feed it business. And
Mm-hmm.
C, you know something about it. So start with a tangential to law, and then as you expand, you'll grow your skill sets so that then you can do something crazy. I still wouldn't do a restaurant, but you can do something that more fits into perhaps a passion you have, whatever
Yeah.
passion that might be. So please start with something you know a little bit about if you're going to do it, and then continue to learn people so that I got my, it's funny, I got my soccer team, and then one of the people on the leadership team also had a company that he asked me to invest in, which I did, that buys the intellectual property rights to the music catalogs of singers. So now I'm invested in another company where we own the rights to The Little Prince, which was that book we all read when we were a kid.
Yes.
So not only do we own IP rights to singers, but we own IP rights to other famous things, which we can now merchandise. So if the Gap wants to put the little icon for the Little Prince on a pair of shorts, we now own the Little Prince. So through Company A, the soccer team, I meet very well-connected investors, investment bankers, etc., who can get me involved in Company B. So now, once you start making money and doing this, it's all about the ping pongs balls hitting each other, and now you get introduced to this dude who says, "Hey, you want to put some money here?" Now they're all somewhat risky, but again, the smarter you are and the more you do this, the less risky it becomes, because you can spot a winner versus a long shot. I'm not investing in Bitcoin and any of that stupid stuff. No, it could hit, but I've got no control over Bitcoin. Other multi-billionaires have control over Bitcoin. I do have control when I invest $100,000 or $500,000 in an entertainment company, because I get to be involved in the discussions about acquisition of, some famous music singer's catalog, because you can have some role in that. Whereas Bitcoin and stuff like that, you're just, you're throwing money at a dartboard and hoping it sticks.
So how much, when you're looking at some of these investments, obviously the soccer team, and we'll get more in depth with that, is very much a passion for you. With something like this IP company, how much do you look at it as this is a kind of bottom line, really looking at the financials and I can see the margins on it, versus, you know what, this kind of sounds cool and I'd like to play in that sandbox? What is it for you?
A lot of these investments I do because it has a high risk, high rate of return, so that's cool. I never put an amount of money in where if I lost it, it would affect my quality of life. That's a general rule I have. So if you've got 20 grand and you could lose the 20 grand and your spouse and your kids and your life would not change at all, then that's the sandbox. I call that the sandbox.
Right.
So I put personally, and this is personal financial information, but I've got 15% of my net worth in a sandbox. 15% of my net worth.
Cool.
Because if I lost 15% of my net worth, neither my wife nor my kids nor anything in my life would change. So whatever percentage that is, and I got that from a billionaire I'm friends with, he said 15, he's a billionaire, so I'm surprised it's only 15%. But at 15% of your net worth, and you can choose 10% or 2%, if there's an amount of your net worth that if you lost every penny, it would affect your life zero, then
Mm-hmm.
you've got some sandbox money. So that's what I consider to be my sandbox money. And the soccer team, the IP company, the MRI center, all the money I have invested, if I lost all of it,
Mm-hmm.
it would not affect my quality of life at all. And at whatever stage of your career, if that's 2%, great. You've got
Yep.
10 grand to play with. Put it in Bitcoin or put it in a real company that you can make money in. But that's my general rule. If I'm going to lose all of it, I don't want to lose any sleep.
Well, that
That's a good
last
rule.
part. Yeah, it is.
You
It
don't
is
want
a
to lose
very good
sleep.
rule.
It's
Yeah.
the I don't want to lose sleep rule, which is if your spouse or kids or college tuition for your kids is going to be affected by any of this, don't do it. Please don't do it if you're saying, I'm going to pay for my kids' college with this. No, no, no.
I
Don't
think
do
that's a
it at all.
really, really important note, because undoubtedly there will be people who listen to this or watch this and go, "Oh, I want to go. I want to go do some wild and crazy investment. I want to find the next IP company." Like, you've leveled up over the years to find some of these bigger and bigger opportunities, which is awesome. With now it being this soccer team, so when you're going in and you're investing in this soccer team, how much are you looking at it as, again, that framework of I'm really excited to be involved versus the I'd love to see what impact I can have on that business, and how are those working themselves out for you?
Well, this is the perfect investment for me, and I'll tell you why.
Awesome.
It's like it checks every box, and that's why I made it my last one. Box number one, it's my absolute passion. It's my favorite thing in the world is the sport of soccer. So checks that box. Number two is it allows me access, and being in a business allows you access to cool stuff. So the entertainment business, the IP, I'm going to get to some cool concert in Manhattan and New York that they have every year because we're invested in some singers where I can get front row seats at that annual concert that's invite only. So if you're involved in businesses that provide you access, that's cool. So through my soccer team, I get access to every Premier League game I want to go to in England. I can get tickets to any soccer team in England that I want to go to, which is part of what I like to do with my wife. So being involved in this gives you access. I happen to have access to the owners of Manchester United, who also own the Tampa Bay Buccaneers through this. So
the Glazer family, right?
The Glazer family. So I can go. I'm a Bucks fan. More access. I can go to any Bucks game I want to. I can go to any Manchester United game I can go to, and any EPL game, and any German Bundesliga game. So through that connections, it provides me access to any soccer game I want to go to in the world. That's amazing. So part of why I get involved is the coolness part and the access part. So if I get to go to a cool concert, if I get to go to a cool soccer game, if I get to have access to cool people, that's neat too. Through my soccer thing, I'm probably going to meet my idol, who's Lionel Messi, the best soccer player in the world.
Awesome.
Through part of the people I'm meeting through the soccer. So again, I view it as the coolness ratio. It checks that box. So you've got the my passion, box one, the coolness, which definitely plays a role, the access to cool things and cool people, number three, and number four, this one also has some amazing tangential relationship to my law firm. And here's how I did that. When I first got involved, I said, okay, so what's the name of the team going to be? And they said, well, you're going to be a general partner. Let's talk about that. So the women's team is going to be the Palm Beach FC Gold. My law firm is Gold Law. So, and I got them to agree temporarily, hopefully it'll stick, the team colors are going to be my law firm's colors, blue and gold.
Those are good colors.
The mascot, who we've already designed, the mascot, is blue and gold, and the name of the mascot is probably going to be Goldman, the first Jewish mascot in the history of Major League Sports.
That's so cool.
So that's ridiculously funny. But as we live in Palm Beach County, which has a high level of Jewish folks, that would be kind of cool to have a mascot named Goldman for a soccer team that we've designed, and it's a blue and gold uniform. So again, more relationship, the name of the team. And since we're building a stadium, I'm trying to work in some stadium naming rights that either the entire stadium will be Gold Law Field, which is a 7-figure value there, or there will be a Gold Law section if I can't afford with my investment the entire naming rights for the whole stadium. Then it will be the Gold Law East Wing or the Gold Law whatever, the Gold Law Drink Zone or whatever. So I'm working the name of my law firm, and also I'll get sponsorship of every jumbotron and everything in the whole place. So again, tangential to my law firm, the value of being the gold law field to my law firm will be, as far as ROI, return on investment, there will be tremendous. So it checks every box.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's my final business, because it checks every box of goodness and happiness for me.
That's really exciting. I mean, obviously, I'm over the moon for you about it. Now, as one of the partners in this team, probably the most well-known minor league team that talks about fan experience that people know about would be something like the Savannah Bananas, right? Where they're
Correct.
approaching things very differently. Jesse Cole over there. I'm curious for you, Craig, as you look at the soccer team and its ability to bring in more people, to level up its play, et cetera. What are you thinking about in terms of fan experience? Like, what do you want to bring to the table on that?
Well, the leadership team we have in place has a lot of experience in pro sports. So obviously we're not bringing in just business people. We bring in people who've been involved in the MLS, which is the pro sports for soccer in the United States. Our league that we're in is the USL, which is formerly what people would consider the minor leagues of MLS. Last week, the USL made an announcement, it was in the New York Times, that they're going to develop a championship level, which will be actually, I don't know, there's an argument as to whether this is good or bad for U.S. soccer, but they're going to make the argument and recruit and pay accordingly that they're going to be at the same level as MLS. And it'll be a rival to MLS because the USL does not feed into the MLS. It's going to compete with the MLS. So it's like, you remember USFL used to actually compete with the NFL because it was a different product. Now we're going to be the same product, but we're going to position ourselves, according to the press release last year, in a slightly different way and market it a slightly different way. And both leagues are going to feed into the European leagues. And they're kind of going to compete, so we're going to see how it works out as far as on a league level. So the marketing will be specific to Palm Beach. In other words, the leaders and the owners are going to try to do different things that appeal to the Palm Beach market. There's a lot of high-end folks here in Palm Beach. It's a very wealthy area. So certainly the boxes will be nice, and there'll be a lot of corporate influence in the sponsorships. So obviously our business plan is going to be tailored towards our demographic.
That's fair. So for you, like if you're looking at lessons that you've learned being this multi-hyphenate entrepreneur or philanthropreneur, the term that I know you've used many times, which I love, is there something that when you walk in, you go, hey, I want us to keep in mind this aspect of business development, of operations, of finance? Is there just something that you tend to zero in on?
Well, at my law firm, I'm really into firm culture. And in many industries, they don't focus on that. In sports and entertainment, it really depends on the ownership. In other words, just like every industry, some industries, the CEO is a jerk and he doesn't want to have good firm culture or company culture. So if I'm part of the leadership team or the ownership team, I'm certainly going to be looking at, how we treat our people. And at my law firm, it's culture comes above profit, period. And if I'm involved in a company, I like to try to impart that upon the company as much as I can. I'm sole owner of my law firm, so I get to make all decisions. I will not be anything near sole owner of the soccer team. But to the extent I can influence culture, I will want to do so and make sure it's a well-run organization that treats everybody well. And from the outward client experience perspective, I have a lot of experience in owning a law firm for 25 years in the client experience. So that translates over in soccer culture to the customer experience. So I look forward to right now I'm CEO of my law firm and I spend most of my time at my law firm. As I get older, I'm in my mid-50s, I'm going to try to do kind of a slow pivot towards the soccer ownership and stay involved in the law firm. And one of my professional coaches, when I was talking about this, he came up with a good term which kind of fits in with the sports analogy. When you leave a law firm, but you're still the face of the law firm, that law firm that you sell or divest yourself from can still hire you back to do mascot work. Mascot work. So just like the word mascot in sports, so I'm still the face. So, but I will be on a retainer with my firm, which whether I own a piece of it or not, to continue to do mascot work, which is community development, community business development, maybe be on the billboards and TV still. And I'm happy to do that because that's fun for me. So I may transition from CEO to mascot of my law firm.
Okay, well, so I think that brings up a really cool question here, which is when you're thinking about that transition, which is fantastic, and you look towards, hey, someone else may step into that CEO role. It's still something that you've built, that you've nurtured, and I could imagine you want to see the culture continue there. How do you prepare the firm culture-wise to maintain what you've built while still allowing for the potential, CEO coming in, putting their stamp on it as well?
Well, what I did is we talk about this at my seminar, Charlie, which is that I actually created a culture department at my law firm. So most law firms, if they're lucky, they have an HR department.
Yep.
Many don't even have that. They just have an office manager. So when I was at about 20 people, I think I got an HR manager for the first time.
Yeah.
And then I realized over the next few years that HR is looked at by everybody as bad cop, right? Why? Because
it's true.
Enforcement, right? Their rules, their discipline, etc., handbook, all the stuff that employees shouldn't, but they do consider bad cop. So once I started hearing speakers like Bill Biggs and other speakers around the country who really focus on culture, and in other industries, I realized, hey, you know what? You can create a good cop department in your law firm too. And the good cop department I call culture. So one of my original office managers in-house, I took her from Disney World. Now, she was in HR at Disney World, and there's no better training for culture than Disney World.
No kidding.
So I hired her 15 years ago, and she was office manager and got to be office administrator. But then once I hired a COO, I had to decide, do I want a COO? And then where do I put my office administrator? Well, her best skill set, to be candid, was culture, because she came from Disney. So I made her the head of culture, which she wanted to be COO, but it was a tough discussion. But I had to have that discussion with her, which is I want a COO with an MBA.
Okay.
And she didn't have an MBA, and that her happy place and her flow was actually in dealing with people. And it's a lot more pleasurable to deal with people when you're the happy police instead of the mean police. And I said, look, if your full-time job is to make our employees happy, wouldn't that be a nice job? You're in charge of happiness. Literally, that's your job description. You're in charge of employee happiness. Doesn't that sound like a fun job? And once I framed it in that way, she didn't want to be COO anymore. She wanted to be in charge of employee happiness. So now the culture department is 2 or 3 people. And they have a mission statement, and their mission statement for their department is to make this the happiest place on earth to work.
Wow. It's a big mission statement.
It's a Disney theme.
Yeah.
And it's the happiest place on earth to work. So that's great. So the way to, and going back to your question, the way to ensure that if I hire a CEO that the culture stays in place is that I make sure that the new CEO is not getting rid of my culture department.
That's just written into the contract, right?
It's written into the contract because I want Michelle to keep her job and I want our culture to stay as it is. So they're the good cop to HR's bad cop.
I believe you made kind of that bifurcation within about the last 18 months, right?
2 years, 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that seems to be yielding some really positive results based on what I've heard you talk about that transition and everything. What does the culture department, what do you think they do really, really well that helps maintain that level of employee happiness?
Well, what's interesting is a lot. We have the Gold Law Games, which is a monthly fun thing we do with the entire law firm. We actually do a lot more than that. That's the most formal thing we do in the culture department. So we have a game room, an entertainment room here at our law firm. So a Gold Law game, for instance, I'm from the 80s. We used to play a game called Bumper Pool, which is a small pool table. So we have a bumper pool tournament once a year, and we get like 32 entries. And it's really fun because there's a couple games a day because we have 32 entries. We also have a foosball table. We've got a Pac-Man machine with Pac-Man and all that. So we have all kind of contests. On a weekly basis, we usually have some sort of contest within our payroll system called Paylocity, where it's post a picture from your high school yearbook the top 3 funniest or dorkiest win $100. That's on a weekly basis. We have fun little activities, and people either choose to participate or not. But they're so fun that why not break up your day by digging up your high school photo, and then we have cutest pet, or cutest cat. I mean, and culture comes up with all this stuff, and how do they do it? They either Google it or they chat GPT it. It's pretty easy to figure out 50 different cool little fun games. So we have a regular intentional, and the key is intentional, strategy for fun. And as you can imagine, that reduces turnover tremendously. It differentiates ourselves in the market exponentially as far as other law firms. We tell them about gold law games and, who's the cutest pet competitions at interviews.
Yeah.
And we interviewed sometimes them in the game room. That's part of the interview process.
There you go.
Show them who wouldn't want to work at a place with a game room, a meditation room, a mother's lactation room. I mean, we provide all these things as part of the culture department. These are all cultural initiatives. And I don't have time to think of all this stuff. So I have employees who think of all this stuff, and I just have to say yes and fund it. And for those who think you can't fund it, think of how much you fund headhunters when you have to replace somebody, or fund Indeed when you have someone quitting every other month. So the ROI on the funding fund stuff is palpable. There's lots of studies in the Harvard Business Review on what turnover costs. So for those of you who think, I can't afford any of this, yes, you can, because you're already spending that money in replacing people who quit.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be a full-on monthly games thing, right? It's cool that you have continually leveled up. That's always something I've really valued when you talk at the Seven Figure Attorney Summit, is you're very earnest about, this is not something that I could afford to do 15, 20 years ago. This is how we stage things up. This is how you approach it if you are at $1 million looking to multi-million. And that's why I really do love the event that you put on, Craig. And with that in mind, for folks who are interested in attending the event, before I ask you the very last question of the show, where should they go? What should they know?
Sure. So the event is called the Seven Figure Attorney, and the reason it's called that is because it's looking for the target is mostly personal injury attorneys, although non-personal injury attorneys get a lot out of it. It's geared towards people who are at or near $1 million in gross revenue. So it may be guys that are 5 years out, 4 years out. If you're at 10 or $20 million in revenue, you still should come because there's a lot of advice there, but that's not really the target. It's for people who are looking to continue or start their process from just being a law firm to learning business concepts. And even if you've learned a bunch, there's a lot more to learn. My law firm is very big. I still learn tons of new business concepts every day because that's who I surround myself with. Yeah. So another company I entered into before number 10 was an AI company, which is super fun. So they're going to be a sponsor at my event, I believe. And cool. So just incorporating AI into your company was one tactic I took. That's the hottest topic at every seminar now. Is AI. People are going crazy with it, and we take a slow, methodic approach to incorporating anything. But so Seven Figure Attorney, spelled out Seven Figure Attorney, the words. It's $1,499. It's a day and a half. It's April 23rd through 25th in Orlando this year. And the speakers are tremendous. Most 3/4 of them are from my law firm. And I'm honored to say that my wife will be speaking again. She spoke last year for the first time on work-life balance for the entrepreneur, which is something we all face because those of us who are listening to this podcast certainly struggle with work-life balance. We all do. So it's the first time it's the only seminar I know where the spouse of the guy running the seminar gets up and poops all over him.
And having seen Colleen talk about it, she does a very good job.
She's amazing and inspirational, and a lot of tears are shed during and after the speech because the impact on your spouse and your family of being a workaholic is very unfortunate. And as we say, nobody goes to their deathbed saying, I wish I had worked harder.
Right. That's right.
So that's kind of the theme of the speech where, I talk about how, many businesses I have and how I do this and that. But she provides the counterpoint, which is, if you don't have some balance in your life, what is the cost of overproduction and
Right.
overvaluing your identity as a provider, which is a mistake.
Yeah. Well, Craig, I know I'm looking forward to the event. I can't wait to see everyone who's going to be there. You attract a really good crowd. So there's a lot of great people to meet there, great networking. Go to sevenfigureattorney.com, the word seven spelled out. And then, Craig, very last question for you. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
Well, I'm watching the final season or the other season of Ted Lasso to make sure I'm caught up when they do
Nice.
a new season, which is one of my favorite shows. I'm also watching Welcome to Wrexham, which is the other story, the other soccer story of Ryan Reynolds, who bought a Scottish Welsh 4th or 5th division team, and they've got promoted each year, which is unbelievable. So I am no Ryan Reynolds, as my wife likes to remind me. I'm no Ryan Reynolds, but it is a nice story of a person who's bought into a low-level soccer team. So I'm following in his path. And I will tell you my dream, which is has not come to fruition, but it's my secret dream. The women's Wrexham team, which has been focused in some of the episodes, has been to the United States once to play a women's team. My goal, and I've only shared this with like 5 people, is that opening day of my women's team, because we have a women's and a men's team, will be against our opening day. Our first game will be against the Wrexham women's team.
Keep me posted on that. I may I may make my way down there.
That is a big, hairy, audacious goal, if I've ever heard one. So that I've shared that with my ownership structure to see if we could get the Wrexham women's team and Ryan Reynolds to be here in Palm Beach County in August of 2026. If I succeed on that one,
I'll be there.
On that one, I'm going on lots of podcasts.
And then what are you reading and listening to these days?
Reading is I'm reading Unreasonable Hospitality.
Great book.
As I'm assigning that to my executive team as well. And I'm rereading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which is by Patrick Lencioni, which is the best book there is on team cohesion, trust, and delegation that I've ever read. And if you, like most entrepreneurs, struggle with delegation and trust and what it takes to have a cohesive leadership team, it is, in my opinion, the best book on those issues. And I find as type A lawyers, one of our biggest challenges, delegation and trust. So that was my Bible, because you cannot grow without delegating and trusting. So that's a couple of things I'm reading.
And then listening too.
So I recently listened to my wife be on a podcast for Atticus, which is a coaching company. And she's like, honey, I just gave a speech again. You got to listen to it. So when your wife is on a podcast, the good advice to stay married is listen to it.
I like it.
That's the most recent one, is listening to my wife on a podcast for Atticus Coaching.
Fantastic. Craig, thank you so much for sharing your story and for sharing that tidbit at the end, the big, hairy, audacious goal with the Wrexham FC women's team. I'm excited for that. I'm pre-purchasing tickets. Take my credit card.
And I'm sure Ryan Reynolds listens to this podcast, Charlie. So Ryan, if you're out there, we're coming for you.
There we go. I like it. Craig. Again, everyone go to sevenfigureattorney.com. That's 7 spelled out, sevenfigureattorney.com to get your tickets for the event in April. Craig, I'll see you there. And thank you so much for being back on the show, my friend.
Always a pleasure. And you're just such a good friend. And it's been an honor to know you and get to grow with you and watch you grow as well.
I appreciate you, Craig. And we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.